There we are. Hey, let's hit the old intro as soon as I find it.
This is not a show and might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and guest.
So, Scott, here I am. Another not a show. We're back. I'm in a new situation, and this is temporary. This is actually Chanda's little space where she teaches. And Scott, you seem to be pretty much same place, huh?
Yep, yep. Nothing's
And
changed.
so Scott Pinot and Judah McNeil coming at you. We are going to talk about art again tonight. And I was thinking we'd talk. I saw your post about how important composition is, and I've always been someone that struggles with composition, um,
Aren't we all?
for the most part. uh, I guess, but we'll talk about it. But so what brought that post on as you were thinking about art, composition, and as you were making art? You're in the middle of a huge project, right?
Yes, exactly. Uh, so the post where I mentioned composition no less than 3 times and how much of a struggle it is sprung from the point where I realized that I was doing a lot of uh, small studies for a composition, meaning individual face studies, right? Studying
Yeah.
a face, and then you study another face, and then you
Mm.
study another face, and the faces are fine, they're good, and it's but then you're like, I've got to start putting this together and making this work. And this is a composition of the Last Supper.
Mm.
So there's 13 figures in it. Christ and the 12. That's a lot of figures. And I was very pleased with my individual face studies and just I knew this was coming. It always happens when there's a composition. It's always the best when you can get everyone together in a room, study them a little bit, photograph them from different angles. This is not that. I'm doing this patchwork and piecemeal. So for me, I was doing some actual studies of models, one that I hired in particular for Christ,
Okay.
and others that I'm piecing together, and I'm trying to make this work seamlessly. Very difficult.
Yeah. So normally, what you're saying is, what I hear you saying is that normally what would be the best would be to uh, get all your subjects in one place at one time, and watch
Ideally,
and look how they interact together. Because
right.
I remember you saying like a lot of what you put a lot of emphasis on the realistic depiction of human um, human what is it called, the
Well, the forms,
form, I guess. Yeah,
yeah,
the human
human
form.
form. So it feels real, like a real hand, real arm, real face. The forms should pop up and feel natural. When you see an arm that's too long, you notice it, right?
Yeah.
Or a feature on the face that's a little bit out of place. That can certainly be done expressively. That's fine as long as it's consistent. But normally, what we find is that we go, you know what? I'm looking at that. I think I did this a little bit too far out this way with this with the outside of this arm. Like I made it too wide, or I can't quite get the shape from the torso where it connect where the chest finishes and the hip begins, like that whole transitions. They're very difficult, very difficult. And so it's always better to have a real model, real clothing, real drapery we call it. Uh,
Draper.
yeah, and in our age, we have the tools of photography, which I think are fantastic, and I think many, but I think many too. too often is of a many too often cases do I see painters just relying on it. You see it on Instagram. You see a lot of very well rendered. It's very realistic, but it seems static, almost like a photograph. And when it gets to be photographic, it's a little too far. I want a sense of realism, but once it starts to, you can't. It feels like a photograph, looks like a photograph, or you can't distinguish it from a photograph. Then what's the point? Um, so I think the photographic tool of having a cell phone or a camera, I think the way that I've found to make it useful, because when you are drawing from a live model, they're moving a little bit, like a live nude model, for instance. They're moving a little bit just because they're breathing. And also your perspective, your head's here, it's a little bit here, you're looking at your paper, it changes a little bit. There's a lot of change dynamic between you and the model. And and that's just from live drawing. But if you're setting up a composition, you're gonna have the same thing. And look, if you're gonna have 5 or 6 figures in a room, they're not gonna be there for hours and hours and hours. So how people hundreds of years ago did it, I know some of that. Some of it, I'm like, I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but I know what I do today, and I take photographs. I will take photographs with live observation, and I'll take the photographs from many angles, the main angle, and then others, so I can go back and reference as though I could walk around them and see their shape and their form.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess that. I guess that. No, I get that. That's what I was thinking when you're talking. Is like, why don't you take a picture of somebody as though they're talking to somebody, interacting with somebody, and try to, maybe do some blocking.
Yes,
like how,
that's what I did. Yep. And so what I did with this picture, it's a lot darker now, but the Last Supper as it stands now, and there you see Christ in the middle there, right here. And that is Andrea. He's a model from Italy that I found on Instagram. Awesome guy, super great guy, and wonderful to interact with. He's the guy I've been drawing, and I have multiple studies of him. And then
let me make you their silhouette.
there we go. Here's Andrea. Oh, Andrea over here.
Yep. Wow.
And then what I did, I'm trying to angle this the right way. There we go. I have, this is still a little bit in the prototype stage. I'm going to change these figures. That's Sylvan, my younger son. I had Talitha, my oldest daughter, and Addie, my middle daughter, for blocking, like you were suggesting. I changed her face quite a bit and gave her here. So, sorry, Talitha. Glad she's not on Facebook. She's beautiful. She would never look like this. I changed her. I'm gonna change Sylvan too. I'm gonna put a beard of some sort on him and age him a little bit. And Addie's she's kind of in profile, so it's a little bit, it's a little bit ambiguous. But the idea is there that I've got real figures in real light, people that I know. This figure just popped out of my own head, and this is it looks a lot like, for those of you who really know Rembrandt, looks a lot like an older model of his that pops up in a lot of his paintings. And that's where I believe it came from. I just really drew the eyes, and then the rest kind of came from it. And so that was pure imagination there. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. Never, ever assume that that's going to work when you're trying to shoot for realism. So anyway, that's where this part of the composition is. This side is still very vague. You can see it's not even blocked in yet, but there's a figure there. It's going to be John reaching over to. So the point of the composition. Let me explain that. I guess this is the Last Supper. They've just eaten the Passover meal, and so in this plate over here, there's the shank bone of the lamb that they've eaten, and underneath it, there's kind of the sprig, the de-leafed sprig of bitter herbs that they've eaten. Okay, so that's the Passover plus wine, and so Jesus has said, one of you, truly I say, one of you is going to betray me. And so over here on the other side, which I haven't worked out yet, you have Peter, he's going to be right here saying, John, ask him who it's going to be. And so John's asking, and Jesus is saying it's going to be the one who I take this morsel that's in his hand and dip it into, this right there, and then hand to Judas. And I have his hand right here. I'm probably going to drop it a little bit lower than the edge of the table here. So that
he's looking right at Judas.
Yeah, well, he's looking. Yes, and us, and he's looking at himself in the painting on the other side of the building carrying his cross. So he's looking at everyone, and so that's another feature that I'll explain very shortly about Jesus looking at everybody here, the omniscient Jesus. So the morsel is going to go here, and then it's going to go here into Judas's hand, and then he's going to run off and do what he does. Then over here, this is the Last Supper. Where's the Last Supper, the institution of the Last Supper? Well, the wine's over here, of course, and then Jesus's other arm is over here, and this hand is on the bread that's for communion. So, and this leads to the altar side over here. Okay. So you have Peter and John, and then Philip, Peter's brothers over here, and you'll have 3 other guys over here. Judas's head will be right here. And so that's the composition. And what I like about it, what I tried to design is they've eaten the Passover over here. This moment is happening, and that's why there's all this discussion. And the one disciple that I invented out of, he's pointing to himself saying, "Is it me?" Right? And then over on the other side, they're all having a conversation over here. So they've eaten the Passover. He's calling out the traitor, and then there's going to be the Lord's Supper. So past, present, and a future, all in one picture. Hopefully, we'll see. But that's the idea. That's the composition. Hopefully, I explained it.
That's fascinating. Oh, you can see that we're here. We're over here as well.
Hopefully that made sense.
So that is your composition.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to me, what that means to me is that what is important about that composition is how it relates to the drama that you are putting together.
Right.
I often get tripped up because of. It's funny you mentioned photography, because I took over a photography class for somebody, and I started teaching it every summer but teaching kids. And a lot of what I taught as far as composition had to do less with the drama and more with rules of composition. So like rules of thirds, the Fibonacci spiral, where's the white, where does your eye go to, diagonals, and your eye was drawn through the painting or the picture or stuff like that. So are you saying that which one is more important to you? Is the drama, is the story, is the narrative more important, or are those things, or are you trying to bring them all together?
So yes, we're trying to bring them all together, and diagonals are happening here too. Oops, sorry. So with the diagonals, it's a little more, it's a little different, but the idea is that I'm angling from Christ being at the peak down one way and down the
I
other
noticed
way.
he's right in the center
Yes.
too, right? So that would
He's
be the rule of symmetry, right?
yes. And the bottom of his head is is the bottom of the full 1/3 of the picture. But this is a wider picture than normal. Very much widescreen. It's beyond widescreen that you would see in the movie theater. But because it's recessed up in a ceiling, the perspective makes it about like it appears kind of like widescreen, whatever widescreen the ratio is for film. Um, so that's how it appears when to the human eye when you're standing underneath it. When I have, and this drawing is to scale. It's to scale. Every 2 inches is 1 foot. That's the only way I knew I would be able to pull it off is to make it to scale. And so the canvas downstairs. Yeah, the canvas downstairs, I can take my tape measure, throw it on here, take inches, and say, okay, that's 2.5 feet, and then I can make a mark and say I need the chin to be here, or whatever the case is. And that's rather than actually gridding out the whole thing, which is what the ancients would do a lot of times. I do not have the time for that. I'm not going to grid my drawing and grid the canvas. I'll take crucial points and I'll transpose those 2 inches to feet and inches, and I'll make it work, and I'll make a little mark here and there, and I'll start drawing it right on the canvas. Whereas Caravaggio just drew it right on the canvas with the model standing right there.
So, but he drew it small though, right? Like you're not small, but not as big as you're gonna, right?
Some of his he doesn't have any as long as mine. Well, actually, no, that's not true. He has two that are either close or right about that size. Yeah, he has some that are about that size, but not many that are this long and wide, tall and long. Yeah, he's got some really big pieces. Yeah, some massive pieces.
And he would just now. So would his model just stand there the whole time?
No. So here's the thing. He came up with this amazing idea. I've shown you my toned ground, right? This piece which I haven't worked on in a while. So mine's chocolate brown. It's a little darker than this, which is following Caravaggio. And what he did is he put these little incisions he put this on when it was wet. Before it would dry, he would get like a pen or something and make little incisions when the model was there. An arc here, a vertical piece there. And it would basically show the outline of important parts of models and maybe where they meet and butt up against another model. So if there's multiple figures, you'll have maybe the torso coming down, and then on the other model, it's their torso, and so that they don't get blended in, he would make this little incision, and X-rays show us this. We can see the little incisions that he made, and so the little pin. It shaves off the colored ground and goes back to the canvas color, and we can see it. He's the only one that did this, and that's why it's been so easy to find, not like to differentiate paintings that he did from those who were trying to paint like him. No one else did it, and so he would.
Why would other people do it? Seems like a brilliant idea.
It's a brilliant idea. He was always about shortcuts, but he was about shortcuts because really, I mean, in many ways, he didn't care that much. He cared that he painted well and that his product was good. He was so confident in his abilities that he saw past a lot of the barriers that we can't get beyond. I have to make this drawing. And I have if I just try to go right on the canvas, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a hot mess. But he also was not a good student and a good learner from those when he did study. So he out of necessity, he couldn't afford models for very long. So he made the incisions. He'd say, "Come back. I can pay you for a little bit tomorrow." he would have them back. He'd position them because of those marks he made in the canvas, and then he just went to town and just created this amazing stuff. But he was that good. He was that good.
Well, you're that good, and well, I don't know about that good, but you're excellent and way
Thank
better
you.
than me. And I can't wait to see how this comes together. I guess I feel a little overwhelmed for you because it seems like so much work.
Yeah,
How are you feeling as far as your approach right
I'm
now? Are you
I'm excited. I'm pumped. So my composition is working out. I'm not going to say better or worse than I thought. It's just it's evolving, and I kind of, when I took on the scope, I was like, I told myself I've got to be flexible with this. I've got to understand that this is not going to go 100% according to plan. I've got to be willing to change and make things change for the necessity of the project. And so far, I've actually, for so far, all of my reaction to everything that's going on has been for the better. I've come up with better compositions, better ideas, uh, because of giving it time and not planning it all out and saying it
letting it
has to be
breathe,
this way. What's that?
giving it time to breathe, letting it breathe,
Yes,
not
yes, yes. And so the Last Supper is coming along just fine. And um, I've had to try to figure out what to do, for instance, with Judas. Okay, Judas is always someone that I think people get wrong. Even really good painters screw this up. For instance, they even the guy that I'm kind of I'm making this my composition after Valentin de Boulogne. He's the they call him the French Caravaggio. It's kind of after this piece, but you know the idea that Jesus is in the middle and then the others are on the other side. Same kind of deal. He's got Judas. Sorry, he's got Judas here with the bag, holding the money bag behind his back, right? Almost like he's hiding it.
yeah,
Why? If you, everyone knew that he was in charge of the money bag and that
yeah,
he was the treasurer. And also, even in that context, Jesus said, "What you're going to go do quickly." And the disciples they deduced that Jesus gave him instructions to go take the money and give to the poor. So why is he hiding the money bag behind? It doesn't make sense. So what I've decided to do, and you can't see it here because there's no composition yet, I'm going to have him holding the money bag close to his heart with the one hand while getting ready to extend his hand, like you could see the hand just below the tablecloth, like getting ready to hold it up to accept the morsel from Jesus to go do his
ooh,
deed. So that's my solution: is hold the money bag right by his heart, which is where where he is in his head. So things like that, you're not going to. It's not in scripture. That's a decision you have to make to try to get the whole of the story.
yeah. I like it.
On the other side, the
So
composition, which
that would be an important composition piece, right? Like where you
yes,
have people holding, where
how do you know it's Judas? Because if you don't identify Judas in this picture, everyone's going to say, well, where is he? And they're going to be confused. Um, so that's the easy way to identify him. Money bag, holding out his hand to accept the morsel. There he is. He's the guy. Um, so that's that composition. And then to further the point on being flexible with composition, on the other side, the piece which I don't have any drawings for yet, they're about to come very quickly, but Christ carrying his cross. I had this epiphany 2 weeks ago. This idea that because what I realized was very down low and central in the picture. Christ is going to be carrying his cross. I'm going to press him down as low as I can, literally, like to have even a layer of humility attached to that. He's going to be pressed really low, carrying his cross from left to right, and way up where he's heading, in the upper right quadrant of the screen of the picture is going to be Golgotha, the top of Golgotha, with the two other crosses, the thieves, right? And it's almost going to be popping out of the picture. So humility there to humility, which is actually in the heavens, basically, right? The cross, where you're going to be crucified. But I'm like, okay, so that handles 2/3 of the picture, all the way on the right upper quadrant, and then middle, but low, Christ. What's going to happen on the other side to make it work? So depending on where you believe Christ was crucified, I know many believe that it really was the Church of the Sepulchre, and I'm probably there. And there are others who think that it was outside on the Mount of Olives, on one side of the Mount of Olives, not the Bethany side, but the other side of the Mount of Olives, where he was arrested, basically. And there are tombs there. There's at least 11. And so there's a lot of good reason to believe that. The East Gate's there. It's very visible. People come in and come out of that part of the city. There's a really good reason to believe that. Probably isn't the case. I mean, I can't go into it now, but there's a good bit of reason to think that it's not the case. However,
theological and biblical.
Yeah, biblically, like historically, factually. And so, but I'm going to make it, for my painting, it's going to kind of be on that side, because for this reason, he came in from the Bethany side. That's where he cursed the fig tree. And the fig tree was my solution compositionally to the left quadrant of the painting. Wouldn't it be interesting if 2 days or a day and a half ago he cursed the fig tree and it withered, and it's this massive fig tree, not like some of the Sunday school illustrations you see where it's like this tiny bush and he curses it and it withers. No, it's this huge fig tree, like massive, because they can be very large, and it's withered. And you have standing kind of underneath it, but to the side, a peasant kind of looking up at it and like, this thing had leaves on it the other day. It wasn't bearing fruit, but it had leaves, right? But now it's withered. And he's maybe trying to pull the garment of a Pharisee standing there watching Jesus, watching this whole procession happen, and trying to grab his garment, saying, look at this fig tree, what happened? And of course the Pharisee's like, get away from me, don't touch me, right? And he's focused on looking at Jesus carrying his cross, satisfied with that, and get away from me, peasant. Under the cursed fig tree, which is powerful. Yeah. And so I was like, wait, I haven't gone far enough. I had another idea. Behind the fig tree, just behind it, I'll have a shepherd asleep on a rock right beneath the fig tree, but off to the side, and his sheep kind of scattering, confused, not being guarded. And so now you have multiple layers of the kind of the destruction of Jerusalem from within, from leadership, from the teachers of Israel, from the shepherds of Israel, showing why they had gotten to this cursed state, as Jesus has just dragged his cross past this fig tree that he cursed for not bearing fruit. So
I think that'd be great. Sounds complicated. Sounds
very complicated.
So that is the narrative composition. What are you thinking? How do you compose it from a technical aspect? Like, are you thinking? Yes. Are we thinking like the spiral is large on the right side and comes down into this little details of the sheep on the left side, or?
Yeah, it's got to be little details on the left side. It's got to be stuff that you don't need it for the picture. You don't have to have it. Meaning, if you didn't catch it, it's okay. You got Christ carrying his cross. That has to be lit up. Like Christ has to be lit by the light.
Is he in the left quadrant, or is he in the center?
Center, down low, lit up The light will be lighting him from the front for him, but it'll be from right to left as opposed to on the other side of the building left to right. But it'll be coming into his face. The light will be coming into his face. He'll be in profile, um, and so you'll see it coming one way as he's heading towards the cross. And Golgotha will be prominent. Golgotha, where he's going, and Jesus carrying his cross. Those will be prominent. These other features these other allegorical features that I've put, that are true allegorical features,
Yeah.
will be dimly lit. They have to be dimly lit, because if they're bright, there will be confusion and the composition will fail, and people will try to say, what's going on there? They need to be saying, oh, there's something else in the picture. What else is going on there? And then ask questions and talk, as opposed to what's the focus. As you mentioned before, this is where it comes back to photography. Yes, we talk about a lot of times, those of us who paint, the squint test. And if when you squint and you look at a picture, where does your eye go? And if it goes to one place and one action that and when you're not squinting describes the whole of the picture, you've done a great job. If you have multiple,
The central action, right?
yeah, the central action. If you have to have two lit sources, how do they relate? Which is more prominent? And are they competing, so that when you squint, can you make out which one's the more prominent? And is there confusion, so that when you open your eyes, the first thing your eye sees, can it find the right thing? Those are the questions that we ask. So all of this fig tree, shepherd, Pharisee, peasant stuff has to be dim, mid to low light, enough to be seen, off to the side, very far, kind of out of the way, and can't compete with Christ. Cannot compete with Jesus carrying his cross for the mountain there where he's going. Those two things, I can light two things. I can have Christ starkly lit, and I can have the face of the mountain there guiding you to where he's going. And that's probably about it. That two things, if you try to light up too many things, more than two things, you're asking for trouble.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because it confuses the audience, right? You want to have one central thing. You have two. Yeah. Okay. I get that.
It
You
gets
don't want to
crazy.
have.
It gets really crazy.
It gets busy, right? Like that's the problem. Is it gets too
Absolutely.
busy.
Right. Exactly. And,
Wouldn't
and,
work
and it,
on the behalf of the audience.
it can get out of control very quickly. A picture, because I didn't learn, I've been studying painting for almost 30 years now, really studying it. Not as fervently the whole time, but on and off and pretty consistently, with the idea of, even when I haven't been studying painting, I've been studying what I see.
Yeah.
In reality, for studying painting, saying I'm coming back to this down the road, and composition, and looking at composition, and with my wife and her photography, helping give her a sense of what I think about composition, because she tries to bounce things off me. I'm like, why are you even doing this? You you understand this? You get this better than I do. You don't need to ask me. I mean, I still give my opinion, but it's there. You find, and you find things that work, and you also have to find things that work for you. Some painters can paint with, I mean, very few can paint with more than two or three things lit up and composition crazy. It's so hard to do. It's so hard. And so the idea is, keep it simple, even if it's a huge scale. Like what I'm working on, the scale is massive. So all the more need for me to be prepared and to plan ahead of time and do as much planning, so that it doesn't become a hot mess on the back end. Yeah.
Interesting. So, give me a little insight into that preparation when you're doing the study. I like that you call them studies. When
Yeah.
you're working on the study, what's going through your head? What are some of the thoughts that are going through your head?
Mhm.
Are you saying, okay, the light is reflecting off of this side of him?
Mhm.
Remember that his nose, or how does what kind of thoughts are going through your head? Like, for example, that study that you're doing with with the Last Supper.
Yes.
Um, what what were some of the more predominant thoughts that you're like, I gotta remember
Okay. So with Last Supper, there aren't many that I like of the Last Supper. So it always starts with looking at what others have done.
that? Okay.
So for me, for oil painting and for studying the old masters, I always look at what other people have done.
Hmm.
I look and I try to say, okay, the 10, let's say 5 to 10 painters that I like the most, have they done this, or how many of them have done this? And I look at what they did. I usually know right off the bat at this point whether they did it or not.
Hmm.
Sometimes they surprise me, like, oh, they did that. It might be it might not be a painting. It might be an etching, or it might be, a drawing or a sketch that they did that I wasn't aware of. But for now, I have like all the big guys. I know what they did. I've pretty much seen it all. Not in person, but I've seen it in pictures, in books. You know, so what did they do? What was their take on it? And with the Last Supper, I don't like it. I don't like what I see. I'm sorry, I cannot. Da Vinci's Last Supper, I'm not a fan. I'm a huge fan of it. It was very ambitious, and it was a failure of painting because it fell apart because of how
Hmm.
I painted it. But I also don't like the fact that it's just they're all separated out. The table goes just sideways, and they're just one person, then the next person, the next. Um,
Hmm.
what I like about um, Valentin de Blome, the French Caravaggios, they're almost on top of each other, as they would be.
Crowded.
Uh,
It's filling. They're filling the space.
right, and they would be reclining at table, and those who interpret that too well, like too
Yeah.
accurately, about them actually leaning into the chest of each other, which would be the case, that looks terrible. It looks weird. It looks crazy weird, and so that's not the way to interpret this pictorially either. So I took my cues from Valentin de Boulogne, and I have my characters also on top of each other, but not leaning into each other, like right
Right.
on top of each other. And that also shows camaraderie, which I like
Right.
with the idea of the 12. This,
Familiarity between them. Right.
yeah,
Not to the point where they're all up in each other's grills, but enough to
yeah.
that they're comfortable with each other.
So that works with that particular picture story, and thus and identifying Judas as the one holding the money bag and accepting the morsel.
Mm.
I've identified him. Okay, everyone knows who Judas is. It should all be good. That's at least on paper it should be good, and we'll see. But that's kind of the thinking that went into that composition. I looked at things. I said no, I'm not going Da Vinci style, or Veronese is another one of an Italian painter who painted this massive piece, and it's like this huge banquet table, and there's more than the 12. It's like everyone in Jerusalem was there at the table. Uh,
Ah.
it tells a whole other story. It's an impressive piece, but I also for what I'm doing, no, we're not going there. And I don't like the leaning into each other. That doesn't work. So I rule out what great painters have done that doesn't work for me or doesn't work for the text. What does work for the text, and I'm telling for this piece, I'm telling the fact that they celebrate the Passover, and I know there's a debate about that because the Synoptic Gospels say they ate the Passover meal or suggested they did, and then John's suggested that when he was brought before the officials arrested, that they were now celebrating or prepare. That was the day of preparation. The difference is Jesus, when they celebrated the Last Supper, was 6 hours ahead of the Southern Jews who
Ah.
who did their timing normally by Jewish clock, sunrise or sunset, by sunrise, sunset. Um, as opposed to the Roman, which was midnight, or like, yeah, the Roman clock was 6 hours ahead. So basically, he celebrated it twice. He celebrated it in with the Passover with the 12, and then he became this Passover lamb on the actual Jewish clock. so so I'm showing that there. You can teach that from this painting. That's what I want. That I want stuff like that where you can say, "Oh, did he really eat the Passover? Oh, yes, actually he did, and here's how." So
That's cool. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that. Theology. I think that's important, not just the narrative and drama, but also some structure. I guess that's an important part of composition is not just where your eye goes or what drama you're portraying, but the story you're telling and the information that you're conveying. It's super important to your composition, right?
if it's biblical, which is all I'm interested in right now at this stage of my life, it's got to be able to be. You have to be able to tell the biblical story, even if you say, I made a concession here for this reason, which is fine. That's fine. Go with that. Um, Make sure it's a good reason. For instance, I just explained, I want to have Jesus walk by the fig tree with carrying the cross right past the fig tree that he cursed. Probably didn't happen, or maybe didn't happen. Let's say maybe didn't happen. But storytelling wise, it works. And so I would tell the children, there's a good chance that this didn't happen this way, but do you see the allegorical aspect of this and the other things that I'm teaching and why it's powerful while Jesus is carrying his tree past this tree that he cursed, because that tree wasn't doing its job, but this tree is totally doing its job and is going to save us. you know.
Ah, okay, well that's good. That really helps me conceptualize, get a grasp the idea of grasp it, not in the sense that I get it because I don't. I think what I hear you saying is there's nothing really to get, or you can't completely get it, but grasp it in the sense that there's
hmm
different things going on, and you're just
Yeah.
trying to bring different things. Like much of art, you're trying to add as much science, right? Like you're trying to add as much structure as possible while trying to tell a good story.
Yes, you said it really well. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. I don't want it to feel like, and I love this example of someone who's trying to run a business or whatever model you're trying, but the idea of, think of like peas on a flat plate and trying to keep them from falling off the edge of the plate. I
Hmm.
don't want that. Not in my composition. I know that understanding of things that you have to deal with comes into play at times, and maybe uh, I don't want that in something that I'm producing on this scale. I want it to feel like it's clay,
Yeah.
and it's not going to fall off the plate. I can sit here and I can push it in one direction or the other, and I have control. I have control over it. And the only way that happens telling this kind of painting, this telling this kind of story, is with preparation, unless you're Caravaggio, and most of us aren't. So,
But and when you say preparation, you're talking about research, you're talking about
research,
thinking through and trying a little trial and error.
studies, and
Hmm.
and even this is amorphous. Like it has it's go.
There's some trial and error involved.
There came a point where I said, no more studies, no more heads. I didn't even have 6 heads. I didn't have 12. I didn't have 6. And I said, I can't. These aren't helping me anymore. Now I need to start putting them up here and then reacting to that. And so that's where I got the Rembrandt head, and I'll get at least 1 or 2 other heads because I didn't study for all these, and I might stop then and do a quick study. I'll look up some images, have my kids come over here, stand in this light, let me take a couple pictures, and then I'll come back to it. And again, that's the nice thing about the age that we live in. We can take the pictures, which is nice. I just suggest for painters, take a couple of different angles so you can wrap around their head. Try to wrap it around the head so you can get as though you can walk up to them and look around them. That's helpful.
It's not 2D.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. Afraid we can't go the full hour. I'm running out of
Yeah.
battery. I'm trying to use my phone here. I don't know how you do this. You use an iPad, don't you?
Yes.
Are you plugged in? Do you keep it plugged in?
No, I started with 100. I'm down to 81 though.
That's
Um,
not too bad.
so yeah, not too bad. But I because of other things that I need to do, I'm switching to an iMac sorry, a MacBook that my wife is not using anymore. So I'll be using that in the future. So I'll tell you how that goes. Um, but
Well,
next cool
good.
thing, real cool. Next month, in the middle of the month, I'm going to Michigan to visit my son and his wife and our granddaughter, and we're gonna drop three of the kids off there, and um, we're gonna go. Karin and our youngest daughter and I. We're gonna go explore different parts of Michigan. But I'm gonna see two Caravaggios on the way. One, I'm gonna see this one at the um, it's the Crucifixion of Saint Andrew. I'm going to see that in Cleveland at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I'm going to see there's another one in Detroit. So I'm going to see two of the whatever. See, there's less than 20 in in the country. I'm going to see two of them on our vacation, so I'm excited. I'm pumped.
Exciting. All right. Well, you're gonna have to come back and give us, or maybe even live blog a few of those
I'll be
experiences.
taking some pictures for sure. Yeah. Yes. I'm
That'd
excited.
be great. Well, thanks again, brother. That was
Yeah.
I think maybe one of our more informative ones. We pack it all into
Oh, good.
45 minutes. That's awesome.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I felt it felt like a yeah, that was fun. It was fun. I like the questions you're asking, and it really gives me it helped me clarify my thoughts. So
Good. Well, this is fun for me. I'm glad it helped because I can't wait to see that. I can tell it's going to take a long time, but I'm excited to be part of the process. It's fun.
amen to that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Let's see. We have two likes. Oh, Lyndon Wagler and Jason Willis. Jason A. Will. Is that friend of yours? Jason A. Will? Jason.
Hmm.
Oh, no, that's a friend I just met actually recently. Yeah, Jason Will at the camp. Jason. All right.
Huh.
Well, thank you guys for the likes
Nice.
and for watching, and thank you, Scott. Another good one. I'll talk to
Yep.
you in 2 weeks. Hopefully, we'll keep this going. We'll get back on track.
Yeah.